the concept of economic functions. A lot of us forget that nature does stuff for free that we would otherwise have to pay for. People have done the math, and different studies have put a different number on that. But if you think about it, we can go cut down trees, plant babies, and then we get more trees, and so nature gives us free trees. We can go scoop up dirt from the forest, and in 20 years it'll make more dirt that we can scoop up from the forest. So if you add up all the things we get for free from nature, like people who can harvest food out of the ocean without having to pay for it, people who can hunt wild game without having to pay for it, the amount of air pollution that is filtered by trees instead of man-made filters, the amount of water that's provided by stable climate that otherwise we'd have to pay for. People come up with different estimates, but probably the best study said that natural services we get for free are valued at triple the global pool of money. You know, it's a really big planet, and it gives us a lot of stuff for free, all of us. If we had to pay for all that stuff, we don't have enough money on the planet. By a factor of 3, we don't have enough money on the planet. I want to challenge you as a theme from now on when you study for the AP test. And again tonight when you study for tomorrow. Identify the ways that nature helps our economy. I'll give you a classic example. In China today, many power plants are more expensive than they should be. People say, look, we can build a coal-burning power plant for $100 million, or we can build a solar power plant for $120 million. And people go, it's cheaper to take the solar for $120 million than it would be to take the coal for $100 million. Because the air pollution from the coal causes a certain number of sick days, and with that many sick days, there's less productivity, and with less productivity, there's less money in the Chinese economy. So forgive me because my numbers are totally made up, but the concept is the coal plant, in addition to costing $100 million, costs over $20 million in environmental degradation impacting the economy. I believe the average Chinese worker spends almost exactly 300 days at work per year. Almost exactly as an average for the nation. If air pollution causes 5 sick days, which is probably a really conservative number as a national average, 5 sick days, that's a 60th of their economy. Or, of their economic output. That's big. Like, those sick days, that hurts. 1/60th of your economy, that's almost like a 2% tax. Another way to think about it is, if we could get those people to work those extra days, our economy would grow by that percent. That's a really significant economic impact. And of course, it's not just coal-burning power plants and air pollution. We have these trade-offs all over the place. When we develop closer to a stream, there's more runoff. That hurts the water. That hurts the tourism industry because the scuba diving isn't as good. And all these things add up. It doesn't seem like it's ever that big of a whoop, but if we got to zero natural functions, we couldn't afford to replace them. So obviously, there has to be a certain value in healthy systems. And if you did your homework, you have a whole list. There's a lot of these. Some of the economic functions are regulation functions, like what nature sort of keeps going, regulatory, like homeostasis in your body. Like when our environment is healthy, there's a natural balance of gases, and that can hurt your economy. Like if all the ozone is gone, people get cancer, and that's not a good thing to have going on for your tourism and your economic productivity, for example. Air quality, stable climate, our atmosphere is worth something. If you add all that up, our atmosphere is probably worth a lot. Having a stable climate, remember that when we destabilize climate, that's economically really devastating. It's funny. We can divide the American political system into pro-economy and pro-environment, but many or most people that are knowledgeable about the economy are really stressed about climate. Warren Buffett had a really big article about how to protect your long-term investments from the impact of climate change. He doesn't doubt it. There is a certain part of our economy that hates the climate conversation because it impacts their bottom line. That would be the energy sector. But remember, if the climate gets all wonky on you, your economy suffers. You've got more sick people. It's harder to provide drinking water. Food gets more expensive. That destabilizes your workforce. We have a perfect example. Perfect example. Do you guys know that California produces the majority of the United States broccoli, and that broccoli is America's #1 vegetable? And perhaps you've heard that we have a massive drought.
Isn't it not lettuce?
It's not.
Weird.
I don't know if it's measured by pound or dollars or calories or what, but I've heard that the top vegetable, like the thing eaten most often as an identifiable vegetable ingredient, is broccoli. Like how many of you have broccoli in the fridge right now? And we're living through what's called broccocalypse. Because there's like a new pest that's totally crashing broccoli production. Anyway. Fun fact, broccocalypse. So, I said it. So now that California is in an extreme drought, the two of the most productive counties, Monterey and Santa Barbara County, can't produce broccoli for the same price that they used to could. The price of making broccoli has almost doubled because the price of water has gone up. So with the price of broccoli becoming so high across America, California's drought is causing a massive drop in vegetable consumption. When broccoli becomes more expensive, you and I don't even notice, like, oh, my butler didn't tell me. But if you imagine how many people, are nickel-diming it at the grocery store and broccoli is double what it was last month, they just go, well, I guess I'll get some Cheetos. And seriously, this is like a really big impact on our economy when, a significant percentage of our population is eating less vegetables. That's not good for our national health. Super direct, simple correlation. Remember how important it is when natural systems can prevent disasters or can help lower the impact of disaster. Remember we talked about the mangrove swamp thing? Sandbars, that sort of stuff? So this is a fake photo. But you understand the issue. You know, those mangrove swamps actually do a whole lot to protect coastlines. Water is really nice. Like, rain is really helpful for your economy if rain makes food. And while people say that climate couldn't possibly be changing because of humans, you look almost anywhere and more people raise their hand when you ask about extreme climate change, extreme weather events in their area. Yeah?
Oh, what did you have for this slide? I kind of went through it on disturbance prevention.
Sorry, this is all the list from the book about environmental services. None of these is necessary. I don't know.
Okay.
Which one?
Disturbance prevention. Like, what did it say?
I don't know. Flood prevention, probably. Storm and flood prevention. You shouldn't copy slides, man. I don't know. I'm referring to your own notes about ecological services. And by the way, the list gets really crazy, so I'm going to start fast forwarding now. Remember that there's issues of water supply, soil retention. You know, we had that one study earlier this year. We were talking about erosion rates. How globally soil erosion outpaces soil generation by, what was it, an inch every 10 years or something? I forget the exact number, but the point is we are flushing more dirt into the ocean than the forest is making for us. And we use dirt to make our food, so that can't be good in the long run. Yeah, like regulating pollution, you know, like more healthy ecosystems means we've got less particulates in the air, and less CO2 being left in the atmosphere because it turns into biomass, and obviously when we get rid of habitat, we get rid of that filtration capacity. Ah, pollination. This is a classic example of an economic function that is tied to ecological health. We use pesticides, all the bees die. When all the bees die, farmers can't sell pistachios and peaches and stuff. Georgia expects somewhere between 5 and 20% economic decline over this decade, the current decade, due to the decline of bee populations. That's big, 5 to 20%.
Because of beach population, right? I mean, because of beach industry.
Yeah, so it's not just. Coincidentally, Georgia is really famous for their peaches, but I don't know that their peaches are especially big. I think that it's just their agricultural productivity as a whole, other fruit. So that's a lot of flowers to work with, and with less bees, that's less money you get from that field. Biological controls. How nice it is to have a healthy ecosystem that gets rid of the bad bugs instead of having to use chemicals for that. In addition to all that regulation, there's the stuff we get that are called habitat functions. So like maintaining diversity, the refugium function. Providing a place to maintain population levels, the nursery effect. And then there's the stuff that nature makes. So we regulate, habitat, and produce. And this is like one of my personal, like, when I go to sleep at night, this is one of the things that really gets to me about environmental issues. Healthy ecosystems make more free food for everybody there. Imagine if you lived in the Santa Barbara that it was 300 years ago. The first time we set a limit on abalone harvest in Santa Barbara, you guys know what that limit was? Did I tell you this already?
Yep.
As many as you can pick up that are exposed by low tide. That was how we regulated. We said, look, they got to be out of the water. Don't get stingy. And people would go out there with like wheelbarrows and just like pick them out of the tide pools and just throw them into the wheelbarrow. And that was a regulated abalone fishery. Before that, it was just hands off. I always talk to my fisherman friends about this photo I saw of this woman in a hoop skirt, like some she looked very petite. She had like a big old hoop skirt. And she's holding this little tiny old school fishing rod that was like super short, had a big old lunky reel. And she's standing there right next to a rowboat on the beach. It was taken right next to what is now the harbor. So it's like downtown Santa Barbara. Off a rowboat, behind her is this big wooden rack with these two giant black sea bass that she caught with some wacky little rod off a wooden rowboat off downtown Santa Barbara. Two fish that are like that thick, like black sea bass. They used to be all over, and I don't know, I guess she just sort of knew what she was doing. And I keep thinking, like, what if we lived in that place? You know, like the salmon? Imagine all of our creeks with these, like, giant red flushes of salmon. Like, we could all regulate that, and all of us could eat, like, really good local food. And we could go grab after work. And we wouldn't have all this, like, crazy food systems with all the agrochemical superpower company, international relations, pollution stuff, because more of us could get a greater percentage of our food by just walking out to the creek. Like, I just feel like we wasted this opportunity. Like, nature used to feed us, and we just, like, kicked it until it stopped giving us food. And now we're all like,
Where did you see that picture?
I can't remember. It was in a book. I think it... So, my buddy Mark said that there's a book called The Blue Gold Rush, the Deep Blue Gold Rush or something. And he said it's got a bunch of that type of photo. But I don't know. It's like some of the crap that's come before my eyes over the years.
You might be able to find out.
I don't, you should look. And if you find a book about that, that's like my obsession, is like how productive systems used to be. There's this movement, by the way. It's called the eco-socialist movement. And the idea is we should all invest in making ecosystems healthier for everybody. Because that feeds everybody better, and it's a type of wealth that lasts forever. Like, yeah, that sounds really good. Yeah, we should, healthy ecosystems for everybody. I like the sound of that. Like, I want to be that guy. Oh. Like, that guy? If you don't know fish, that's a really good fish.
What fish is it?
There's other stuff, like raw materials we use, like lumber. And genetic resources. What is the value of our diversity? Because it gives us those medicines we're going to need in the future and those new food ideas of the future. Okay, look. There's a bunch of other stuff too. And then the intangible resources, like recreation and aesthetic value, spiritual inspiration. Before I waste too much time, I want to remind you guys, make sure you know as you study how to assign an economic value to healthy ecosystems. A lot of times, if it's free, we don't think of it as an economic issue, and so we squander it. And we go, oh, but now I'm out of abalone or whatever. I got to move on, sorry. I got a little carried away thinking about that. Number 2 is a 3-star study goal. Particularly the terms external and internal. External costs are a cost associated with a transaction that's not captured in the transaction. So like when you buy gasoline, you're going to wear out more of the road. If maintaining roads is up to everybody, then that's an external cost. If there's a gasoline tax for maintaining roads, then it is internalized. To internalize is to make an external cost a part of the transaction. So here's a great example. These things, these televisions, this type of screen is really expensive to dispose of. So what we do now is when you buy it, there's like a $27 disposal charge. So when this gets to Marburg, they call the dude that puts it in the truck to get rid of the big monitors. There's a disposal cost for car batteries and the tires of a car. So when those get to the right end point, there's a separate disposal system covered by the purchase of car batteries and car tires. Those are internalized costs. And your generation has one intellectual obstacle that hasn't been faced until you. How to internalize the cost of climate change. Remember, every time somebody comes up with a dollar value, it gets bigger. These are some crazy runaway predictions of how expensive it's going to be to deal with climate change over the next 100 years. Remember how we talked about how Santa Barbara's going to have to move the train station and the wastewater treatment facility and raise a couple of the bridges because of rising sea level? Globally, that's a lot of money, plus the rise in diseases. What's that going to do to the economic bottom line? Shortages of food and water. What's that going to do to the economic bottom line? Environmental refugeeism. Who's going to pay for all of that? Destabilized climate. Who's going to pay for all of that? Right now, everything we do that causes climate change does not include money to deal with parts of the problem. It's a cost that we're just saying, I don't know, someone else will deal with that. We know when we drive our cars and when we use coal power plants and when we eat meat, we know that causes a certain percentage of climate change. But the cost is like, whatever, they'll deal with it later. You know who's going to deal with it later? Like, I'll probably be retired when we have to move the train plant. But you won't. The train thingamabobber.
Now we have to move it to bigger.
Right to sea level, yeah. Train station's what? 3 feet above sea level? 2 feet above sea level? Your generation will have to figure out how to internalize the cost of climate change. And let me remind you, this is the intellectual obstacle for the international community in the long run. Because only a few nations are causing the majority of that climate change, but all nations will have to pay these costs. At least in our case, our economy has grown, maybe we can afford it. But Ecuador isn't causing climate change, and they're going to have to pay these costs too. Okay. Number 3, 1 star, section 28.9, and write this down, please. I strongly recommend you look at tables 28.2 and 28.3. I'm not going to discuss these in our remaining 4 minutes. I'll leave it for you to look at the book. In number 4, you should know that this is a global trend that the College Board has been focused on. An underlying theme of your book is urbanization. When you develop an economy, people go to the cities. It's like, well, living on the farm is pretty rough, but out of the capital, they got more factories. That's more lucrative work. I'm going to go live in the city. Economic development leads to urbanization. So globally, more and more people are living in cities. You know this. It's a trend we talked about in this class. When I was born, there were like 5 cities larger than 8 million. When they wrote the book, there was 30-something. Today, there's 50-something. Humans are crowding into a few really, really crowded spots, the megacities. By the way, in the first world, we're not. We are, I hate this word, ruralizing. We're going back to the rural landscape to get away from all these crowds and like people and stuff.
Why do you make
Neighbors
it work?
away from me. Number 5, 1 star for the terminology. Number 6, I can't believe I fumbled his name. It's not Frank, it's Frederick.
Yes. His evil twin.
It did say Frank in the book? Whatever it said in the book, who cares? His name is Frederick. And the reason I shouldn't have fumbled his name is I'm obsessed with the guy. I take my annual family selfie at the end of summer on Olmsted Peak, which is a spot named for him because he had a really wacky idea. He said, if we have more nature in cities, people will be healthier, happier. Maybe they'll stab and rape each other less and live longer and build our economies. And he was right. Now, these things are empirically proven. But at the time, it was a pretty wacky idea. He was paid to develop the city of New York. And everybody goes, wait a minute. How'd you get this job? What do you mean you want to build a big-ass park? That's not city. We need city, not park. He's like, no, park is good for city. And everybody's like, bro. But he was right.
Such a cool idea.
Number 7 gets 2 stars. What's up? And in number 7, I want to remind you that our cities change our nature. Cities cover up soil, so we have no more soil. Cities prevent the recharge of water. They increase the runoff of water, and they increase the pollution in that runoff. Finally, cities change the temperature of the land. It's called the urban heat island effect. We've talked about this before. That's a 2-star concept because the College Board loves the urban heat island effect. There are 5 reasons for the urban heat island effect. If you don't know them, you should. Less wind because buildings block air circulation. Less shade because there's no trees. Less evaporative cooling because there's no plants. Cities add heat because of all those light bulbs and motors and fans and cars and stuff. So cities generate heat. And finally, they absorb and retain heat because of the color and thermal mass. Asphalt, metal, concrete. That was exactly where I was going. We made it. 8 no stars.
Yeah, Jose.
Hasta mañana. Quiz time tomorrow.
Or the